All right, let's get started. Um, that's me on the right there. I'm holding knives. I sell knives. And then on the left there, oh my God, I love Jujutsu Kaisen. Um, I used to watch the anime. I finished it and then I was like, huh, well, I'm gonna read it. And I think that was like the best choice I've ever made regarding starting watching manga. I mean, damn, what the hell? Starting reading manga. Um, I haven't read any other manga. I've read like webtoons, things like that, but this is the first manga that I've ever read, and it's amazing. And I just want to preface the rest of this recording. I want to spend more time on the visual parts or the more ambiguous notes that I made throughout the lesson. I mean, throughout the I said lesson. I feel like you, Bledsoe-sensei. But I meant the um parts of the project, the more ambiguous parts of the project. Um, and so I'll be paying more attention to those than the other parts of the project. Um, but I would love to talk about everything here. And just to start off, we have some insight from Kurotatsu-san, which is a very, very cool name, by the way. I actually met him on Discord, and his profile picture was a black dragon. But I didn't get the connection between that and his name until he taught me well what it meant. But yeah, just an overall really cool dude. He's 20, I believe he said 23. Yeah, 23, and he does live in the U.S. currently, but he visits every other year, and um, he was raised there when he was little. Um, but yeah, like I said before, I'll keep like these sections short. Um, but I do want to share like one. I feel like the conclusive piece that I got from the actual interview is that younger generations uh they don't really, I don't want to say care too much, but like there's more tolerance, there's less judgment, um, and that's both towards foreigners and people that are native Japanese, that are native Japanese. Um, like it's easier to make friends in general, among younger generations, because they don't uh, emphasize the social rules such as using surname rather than first name when you're not close. They don't really emphasize those as much, and I think less emphasis on that is what is allowing foreigners to become friends easier in Japan and feel more welcomed in Japan. Oh my God, belonging. Oh my God, I chose the senpai kohai relationship uh to present in this project because it's something like I've always been quite fond of. Uh, they showcase it a lot in anime, and I never really paid attention to it. Not until like I started this class, and um, one benefit from the Senpai Kawai system is that like I just think that peers and people within schools are and students within schools are much more connected. Um, like in like Western society, like me personally with my school, um, there's just a lot more individualism, of course. And there's like I don't really feel connected to the people that are below me, the grades that are below me, or the I would say the people that are above me, but I'm the senior now. But uh, me being part of the early college here, I've connected with college kids, of course, and so there is still that senpai kohai relationship. Um, and I feel like if I went to a normal school, I don't like a conventional high school in America, I don't think I would have had that senpai kohai relationship. Um, and I included a picture of Norm's loft. It's in the Union on the mezzanine level. And the loft is like known for the place where uh, people on campus come and play fighting games. And I was first introduced, actually, me and my friend Jacob, me and Jacob Moa in your class, um, we were first introduced into the loft in ninth grade, so 2019 or was it 2020? One of those. And uh, it was it was one of the juniors. His name is Gio, one of the juniors in our class, in our school, I mean. And he had already been on college campus, and he was like, guys, like you guys like fighting games? 'Cause we were playing Tekken in ninth grade. He was like, you guys like fighting games? And he said, you guys have to go see the Loft. I'm like, we're like, oh my God, what's the Loft? And ninth grade, he took us there, and that's when we were introduced to the, uh, I guess I don't want to say like the school of fighting games, but I mean like that's quite literally what it felt like. We were being schooled, um, and with seniors or like with people that are younger than me, like there are not people in the grades below me that are coming to people my grade that are asking for advice or like really looking for that mentorship or apprenticeship or like even like trying to establish any kind of connection. And in the loft, like for me and Jacob, like we've learned from and taken after. We call them the old guard of the loft. There's Billy, Connor, Daniel, and AJ, and we call them the old guard because they've been there the longest. So they're old. They're not that old, but they're old, um, older than us. They're our seniors, and they just taught us like the ways of fighting games. And like we've taken after them. And I feel like that's not really prominent in a lot of Western schools. Uh, yeah, and like even even within that loft, like even within that loft environment, there wasn't really like a cohesive uh cohesive mind between all of us. Actually, the fighting game community in general is like very uh it emphasizes very much the expression of self, and I mean, I should say that it allows for that. There's so many different characters. There's so many like different ways to play the characters. Like I feel like this the channel that is fighting games is is what is what enables people to be so expressive of themselves. It's probably why it's like that in the fighting game community. There's so many different people, and that's honestly what it's like or at least what it's been like for me in every group I've been in. Like it's really just a bunch of different people that have connected over one particular interest. And there's a lot of discussion on that interest. So like on the left here, there's Hamilton, there's WWE, there's Avatar, there's Star Wars, um, there's me at dinner with my coworkers. So knives, the interest there is knives. There's fighting games. There's Third Strike. Okay, that that the picture on the top right with the white laptop, I'm playing Third Strike on my bed, and that was from 2019. Um, there's stuffed animals. There's Gerard, the lead vocalist of My Chemical Romance. Yeah, yeah. But I will say like when it comes to like making decisions or like making plans, there's a very like democratic process. So usually that's usually when people, how do I say this? Like, uh, uh, we don't have a lot of conflict, I don't think. But the most conflict you see, or the most conflicting ideals you see, is when it comes to like making decisions or planning. Um, and that's where I think like we differ the most from when it comes to the Japanese group consciousness. A lot of self-expression, uh, a lot of conflicting ideals. Yeah, and that is because of the already already the precedent that's already been set of discussion, which is in the West, more so in the West than in the East, in Japan. Oh boy, empathy. Um, Traditional Japanese beauty is coined by and seen prominently through the lens of Mono no Aware. And the translation I like a lot is an empathy towards things. And what that entails is empathy for me is like putting yourself in the shoes of, which I guess a lot of people have that fundamental understanding of. Um, and when they say an empathy, when the translation says an empathy towards things, um, what I take that to mean is dwelling in the atmosphere, the world, the realm of that particular thing. Um, and the reason I started practicing that so much, even like before this class, is because I realized that like every single place we go to has a story. Um, and there's never really like a way to know what that story is. Um, and so what I do is that like I imagine myself being in there, or I just sit with it. I just sit there, and like I create a story, I create a story in my head according to the atmosphere, the feelings, the tone, the mood that that particular place sets. Um, and I do feel like that is much more prominent in the East than the West. Um, and this was also noted in the book The Japanese Mind. Um, typically, typically what I've noticed is that when in the West, like when people see things that are ugly or that are not exactly beautiful to them, what they do is like move away from it. Um, and also noted in the Japanese mind is that um, we have like a logic of what is beautiful. I feel like the most prominent example would be the physical aesthetics of people that we see in the West. Like people value or people have like set criteria for those things or for beauty when it comes to for people. Um, and yeah, and just to give an example of like what I mean by dwelling in the atmosphere of, um, me and my mom were cutting some weeds in our backyard, and there's like we saw like a really old wet vine because it had rained the day before, so it was wet. Some really old wet vine that was wrapped around the fence, and most people they're just like, oh yeah, like the vine is like really ugly, like it's withered, it's falling apart. Um, yeah, like it's really not conventionally pretty. Um, but I took a moment and I was like, whoa, like this is I've never seen a vine like this, and it had like moss growing down the side of it. Um, and it just like so the color was like that in the picture. Like that's not what it's like. That's not a vine in the picture, but that is the color that it was, and it was breaking apart. And it also had like those small cuts in it that like the ones that the picture has as well. And it reminded me of the spine of a book. And I immediately like the thought of like old magic textbooks being written like just popped in my head as soon as I saw that. And I just had a feeling. I felt as if I was in a library, a very old library filled with with mastels. I mean, oh my God, magic and crystals. Um, and it felt like that vine felt as if it held the knowledge that a grand wizard would have. And so like just holding it, looking at it, like it made the backyard feel magical, um, enchanted. All right, Ikigai. The very first thing I noticed when I read Ikigai, uh, or when I saw this diagram, I should say, was the section "What the World Needs." Um, I immediately thought to myself, like, huh, I bet typically isn't the first thing that I consider when it comes to finding a purpose for living. Um, not really, not well, yeah, but I do value giving back and having impact on the world. Um, I typically don't. It typically isn't the first thought, and I think that's because of the fact that I live in a very individualistic society, which is not. I don't think is bad at all. It's just uh, definitely in Japan that is but it's definitely emphasized more. So it does make sense that it's there. Like, definitely makes sense that that is part of the Japanese conception of a purpose of living, Ikigai. It makes sense that it's part of Ikigai, what the world needs. Um, yeah, and there's a lot of like what I want to do. I want to make a lot of these hobbies, so singing, writing, drawing, wrestling, fighting game legend, and along the way of every single one um, of one of those hobbies, I just imagine myself like traveling to find more out about those particular hobbies, um, seeing how other people enjoy them or practice them, um, and like meeting people along the way. And I kind of likened all of this to One Piece, because that's exactly what's happening. Like they're traveling, going around the world. They're meeting. Luffy's constantly meeting new people, and there's just a very strong sense of camaraderie, which I want to have when traveling the world and meeting new people and discussing these hobbies. And yeah, and competition as well, especially in wrestling, fighting games. Writing, singing, and drums, not so much, but there is a sense of performance which I associate with competition. Um, and competition in the context of One Piece would be trying to find the One Piece. Um, yeah, and I won't go into too much about my Ikigai. Rather than I do want to like spend some time on the on the last sentence of what I mentioned here, which was all the world needs is a moment. Um, and the best way I like to describe that is by bringing up the topic of Evo, and then of course Jujutsu Kaisen. But Evo, there are or last year there were 9,000 people in the audience. 9,000 people in the audience to watch just two people on the main stage play a game, play a match, play a set. Um, and that reminded me of Jujutsu Kaisen, Gojo versus Sukuna. And the name of the arc of which Gojo and Sukuna fight is called Shinjuku Showdown. And Showdown is connotative of performance and intensity, and um, it's a spectacle. Like it's quite literally a spectacle. It's a moment along the timeline of Jujutsu. Um, like two people on the main stage of Evo is a moment in the timeline of fighting games. And the thing is like there are so I guess like let me go back. Let me go back. So when I said like all the world needs is a moment, I, what I wanted to express was that all it takes is like all it takes is one moment of listening and paying attention and taking in um, to transport to another world or to understand and appreciate um, something, whatever that may be. And for me, uh, that is competition. That is fighting games. That fighting games is the most direct experience I have of that, of taking in just one moment. And I guess what I meant by what all the world needs is one moment. I was applying that to singing, writing, drawing, drums, guitar, cello, trumpet. Um, I was thinking about the topic earlier this week of invitationals of fighting games, and what they do is they invite the best players, but they invite only the best players, and so the nature of that invitational, it's much more intense. There's much more intellect being expressed, and I personally would like to make a showing of that, like a grand showing, um, a grand spectacle of that. And I want to show off essentially, which is why I like the connotative, um, I like the connotation of the word showdown. It's connotative of performance and intensity. And in competition, like of course there's an expression of intellect. There is the actual play that you enjoy. But I really do love the performance aspect of competition. Absolutely. And that's what like Evo is the world's largest annual fighting game tournament. And it's symbolic of that. It's symbolic of the highest echelon of gameplay, strategy, intellect, and spirit. Um, it's all here in this one tournament. And community. That's the one difference between invitationals and tournaments like these is definitely the community. And like I said earlier in this presentation, I didn't want to spend too much time going over uh, the uh, the more detailed word-wise slides that I have on here, but uh, I do want to spend some time talking about the straying of designated roles in Japan and the shame that is brought upon the individual. Uh, and Libra outlines the Japanese the Japanese occupying of the proper place as the individual being conceived as a fraction. And in order to be somebody, you must be contributing to the whole society or group. In other words, you are a piece of the puzzle. And I recall you, Bledsoe-sensei, saying that, or t letting us, blah, blah. I recall, like, in one of the lectures, he told us that in order to, uh, if you want to transition in Japan, you have to declare yourself as mentally disordered, or like you have a mental disorder. And I never really forgot about that. And um, the reason I didn't forget about that is because I was placing my shoes into someone who was transitioning. Um, on a legal level, that isn't intolerance. I guess they're allowing you to still transition. Um, but I couldn't imagine like the great deal of like shame or guilt that that person feels when they're declaring that they have a mental disorder, knowing that they don't, or at least I, I mean I don't know exactly why you have to declare that you have a mental disorder or what that stems from, but to be that person that is doing that, to be the person that has to do that, um, to be forced like out of the norm and for there to be a title, mentally disordered, which notes that you are not part of the norm. Um, in a society where being a piece of the puzzle, or contributing to the puzzle, and being part of it is vital. Uh, one, it's a dangerous position, and like I said earlier, like just considering the shame and guilt that they must feel, I couldn't imagine. I couldn't. And in contrast to Japan, uh, I don't think that there's as much of a emphasis on role, um, especially gender roles. Um, and even, yeah, yeah, no, no, yeah, especially gender roles. For me personally, though, I can't say that there's ever been like a defined role. Um, Elementary school never really talked about it. Family never really talked about it, other than respect your elders. That's the only thing that I really felt was my role. Like my role should be a student, and my role should be a listener. Um, and then everything after that, like that, everything else was up to me. Like I got to choose. And it wasn't because like I was given that. It was just the environments that I was in, which was for a long time just school and home. It was never really talked about. And so, I guess what I wanted to express by including this picture here is that, uh, when interacting with people in society, or when uh, just going about like my day, I guess. Um, this picture, like this wallpaper, is what it felt like. This is my old desktop wallpaper. Right now, it's Gojo versus Sukuna, but this was mine for a long time. And this is quite literally what it felt like. Um, I was taking everything in. I was listening, I was seeing, observing. Um, I was analyzing every detail, and I don't think I have a problem with that at all. And I was honestly just really fascinated. Uh, yeah. I mean that was quite literally my role, like just being a student, being a listener, being an observer. Um, and this is how it felt. All right. And like I said, well, once again, this will be the last time I last time I like outline this, but I don't want to spend too much time on the wordy slides. Um, but wabi-sabi to me um, is a feeling, like it's the feeling received after the application of Ichigo Ichie, which is um, appreciating and then paying attention to um, no, no, which is appreciating um, the given moment. And the application of that is paying attention, which results in a feeling of wabi-sabi, which is what I feel. And that feeling that I get, that magic in that moment is the realization that I already have all that I need. And that in itself is is simplicity. Um, I mean, by definition, like we're living simple lives. We're living one moment at a time by definition. Um, yeah, and in every moment, like if you're able to apply Ichigo Ichie in every moment, realize that you have already all that you need. Like for me, what it's done is it's given me contentment, and it's not exactly excitement, but it's peace, and in that peace, I find happiness. And this simplicity that's been introduced to me by Wabi Sabi is definitely like inspired me to incorporate it in my gameplay as well. Um, with every fighting game, but more specifically, Marvel vs. Capcom 3. And so we have Wolverine, Doom, and Iron Fist. Um, these three characters, they they have very, very simple execution. Like when I play Wolverine, I'm doing the same combo every time, and it works because it does enough damage to kill, um, and it gives me corner carry. Like that's literally the only combo I need. Very simple character. Well, very simple execution at least. But that's the same thing with all three of those characters. It's just since there is a very simple execution and game plan, I have much more mental space to make decisions and play a much more cerebral game, meaning um, psycho-analyzing my opponent or uh, like weighing out the options. I have much more space and time to do that. Um, which I've realized is exactly what Sukuna is doing in the manga. Like Sukuna, his curse technique, Bledsoe-sensei, his curse technique is literally slashes with no sword, no weapon, slashes, and he only has two of them, slashes. And the thing is, like in his fights, I don't mean to spoil anything. Wait, is this a spoiler? No, it's not. It's not a spoiler. But in his fights, with this curse technique being so simple, one thing that people will tell you about Sukuna is that he uses lots of binding vows. Um, he has a he has a heightened level of understanding when it comes to fundamental jujutsu, um, and he's able to use that much more in his fights because of one, the fact that he has uh, copious amounts of knowledge, and two, like he doesn't have to worry about controlling his technique uh, or mini managing it. or changing it, um, because of the fact that that it is simple, that it is simple. Um, yeah, yeah. And in addition to it being simple, like he has perfected it. He has mastered and honed his technique to the point where when he's in fights, when it comes to output, he overwhelms all other jujutsu sorcerers, which reminds me of the methodology of the Do spirit in Japan. And let's see. Oh, gotcha. Um, yeah. So one thing that I've definitely taken from this class is, and this is like this is one thing that I noticed in day one, um, was that we were talking about oh my God, I forgot the word. I forgot the I forgot. But but it amounted to Japanese people are constantly aware of and thinking about what the person that they are interacting with is thinking and what they are feeling. Um, and I believe that stems from a Buddhist principle, which is referred to as no self or non-self. And I've actually heard this concept referred to in terms of competition. My favorite fighting game player, Justin Wong, actually, he brought up like this notion. And he isn't Japanese, he's actually Chinese American, but I don't know if he holds religion to, or if he practices religion at all. Um, but but the thread here is that the concept of no self or non-self stems from Buddhism, and Buddhism is a key factor in the Japanese mind, the Japanese character, um, which is probably why Japanese people are constantly thinking of the other person at all times, um, always taking into consideration like what they're feeling, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. And I know earlier I mentioned that like I was a uh, a listener and observer, um, but I was never really like interacting with people. It was more so listening and taking in than interacting. So when I say like I've I pay more attention, like I'm actually interacting with them rather than like just taking it in, rather than soaking it in and being a sponge. Um, yeah, yeah. And like one of the ways I see this like reflected in uh in Japanese relationships is are the rituals or like the way that they're interacting. So like tatemae, like most of the instances that I see tatemae being used is usually they're being very polite and making sure that they're not conflicting with the other person or uh, that they're not how do you say offending the other person because they're understanding like what they say like might have a harmful effect on the other person. Yeah. And in terms of like just general communication, I do think that I'm able to interact with Japanese people very well, but the problem the problem is that I feel like I'd be very well I feel like I wouldn't be now that I'm saying it, but currently I am very casual. I always use people's first names because I like that, but unless it's an elder, like even you, Bledsoe-sensei, like I wouldn't go around calling you your first name. I was about to say it, but I wouldn't go around like calling you like your first name. Um, I always call like my elders, my professors, my teachers by their last name. Like that's always how it's been. Even outside of school, like that's how it is. And I just included the picture of the surfer dude because like I always imagine them as very casual. They're extremely casual. And I was also raised in the South, so like they always told me to be they always tell me like you're as sweet as pie. Um, and so I do think that like I'd be much more uh polite and more sensitive to the way that I'm making other people feel, which I believe I share with the Japanese. Um, and the man on the right there, I included him because, you know, even though he is from the South, like he's not as sweet as pie. Um, and I wanted to relate that to Japanese culture. That is to say that, like, if there is an outburst of anger, if there is like an expression of hatred or just negative emotion, um, I don't think that would be, I don't think that would be perceived well in Japan. Like, you wouldn't be seen as part of Japanese society if you are having an outburst of anger in public or something of that nature. Um, like I said, that man is not as sweet as pie. So, you know, is he really from the South? I don't know. I don't know. But yeah. And Nimawashi, I honestly, I honestly think that I would partake in Nimawashi. I personally enjoy more intimate and personal settings. Um, And honestly, I feel like it's probably more freeing and more liberating for Japanese people to express their true feelings in those settings. Um, I do wonder though, like if their answers change based upon like the person that's coming to them with these plans or proposed changes before the meeting. I wonder how like truthful um, the conversation actually is held in there. Uh, yeah, but I do think one like it would be a lot of fun to do that. Um, not lie to people, but but just Nemawashi in general. I feel like that'd be very fun. Um, like getting to understand like people's true thoughts in the situation and doing it in a very freeing and open environment. I think that environment just breeds fun. And I know that I said that like there honestly probably are instances where Japanese people in when being met with Nemawashi, when being met with proposed changes, um, and it is somebody that they don't like there probably is uh, some degree of tatemae and not expressing your true emotions. And I understand that typically like making sure and I'm sorry, that typically keeping that distance from that person is expressed by, uh, you know, not shaking hands or not getting close and refraining from uh, sharing personal information. I understand that there is a lot of that. Um, it's just it is very an intimate environment though, so I feel like it would be extremely awkward. Like I honestly don't know how it would go. Honestly. Um, I wonder if if the person that is proposing a change would, uh, like try to like get to that point of uchi rather than soto by like gift giving before the proposed changed, or I don't know. I don't know exactly how they would do that. The most prominent example what I would think of is gift giving. Um, and I want to bring to light interaction I had on Wednesday with my coworker and with this beanbag. And so I I I I I invited my coworker into the house because it was raining and we weren't gonna drive to school. I mean drive to work. Um, and then a few hours go by because we're just like making calls together. A few hours go by, and I just invite them to my room to show them something. And I didn't even invite them like inside the room. I just like pointed to something out, like standing outside of it. And After I'm done showing them, I walk out to go use the bathroom. I'll say I'll be right back, and then I come back and they're in my room and they're laying on my beanbag. And you know, I was honestly extremely conflicted. And the reason I was extremely conflicted is because I didn't know how how to address the situation. Like I felt conflicted as in I was annoyed that they entered my room without asking, and then I also felt like I understood that they wanted to lay in the back, and I was glad that they were enjoying it, but I was still conflicted because I felt annoyed at the fact that they were in my room without me telling them to go in there or without them asking. Um, and yeah, and I honestly didn't know how to react in that situation, and I guess I can't be too upset because I didn't establish like a clear line. I guess I suggested that they should go in there because the door was open and I was showing them something in my room in the first place. But hmm, I I really don't know how to feel about it still. Um, I guess like the line that I will draw next time is uh, hmm, I guess I just won't even ring up my room. Yeah, I think that's what I'll do. I think that's what I'll do. And ooh, the wind in the pine tree. This is like the first, well, not the first, but um, yeah, this is the first folktale that I've read outside of instruction from the class and the assignments. And one thing that I noticed was like the topic of love. That's what I don't. It's not what the folktale is about, but there's a concept in there, or there's a line in there. And it says, lovers wandering upon the beach at Takasaga would hear the great company of spirits singing together. Joy of my heart, they said to one another, do you hear the wind in the pine tree? Um, so it isn't like the actual wind that they're hearing. It might be, but in the context of the actual folktale, they're likening or they're saying that the spirits singing together is the wind of the pine tree. And it reminded me of a of a of a quote that I hear all the time, and I liken to Disney is love is in the air. Um, there is a lecturer called Bashar, and one of the things he says is love is the inherent natural vibrational frequency of existence. Um, and so when the folktale was likening the wind of the tree, or saying that the wind of the pine tree is the great company of spirits singing together, um, I likened that to saying like I was like, oh, this is an example. This is an example of what Bashar was saying. He was saying that um, love is the natural vibrational frequency of of existence. Like the lovers walking upon the beach were listening to that frequency, the wind in the pine tree. And then the left, uh, God, it's such a good song. It is such a good song. Um, and I thought about it once I read the folktale, and there was another line from the youth. He was saying, I hear the call. I may tarry no longer. Voice in my heart, I hear and I obey. Um, and all he did before he said that was he looked into the air, saw the crane flying, and immediately knew that he had to go offshore. For what? I don't know. Does it even say in the folk tale? But, but, um, he was following the currents of love, or like there was something in his heart that said, huh, I have to go. And so what he was doing in that particular situation is he was following the currents of love. And I put currents of love in quotes because it's one of the phrases that they use in that song. Um, and that's something that I've honestly practiced doing. There's another song by Justin Timberlake which is called "Like I Love You," and one of the lines is, if you let go, the music will just move your bones. And um, once you get to that point, like it definitely is a feeling of love, a feeling of happiness. And all you really have to do is ride the currents. Um, just most of the time, I, like many others, are afraid to get in the water. But the youth in the story, like he just knew, like he was ready right then and there. Oh, I did not mean to play that song. Yep, and then all of this is outlined. Oh, living life in harmony with nature. Yeah, I believe that that's a very Japanese notion. Um, and at the end of the poem, I mean, at the end of the folk tale, the youth and his maiden, or the former maiden, his wife now, um, they pass. They pass under the pine tree. Um, that's where they met, and that is where they ended up dying. And even after death, um, and they were joined in spirit, and the pine tree is what received them. Um, and so when it says living life in harmony or just being in harmony with nature, um, the poem was very, I mean, the folktale was very reflective of that in the couple's passing and the couple eventually joining the pine tree. Oh man, things are gonna get I said things are gonna get crazy. It's not gonna get crazy. But history of Japan. Um, I do want to first note these red brackets here. Not the last bracket, but the first two, the first red brackets. There's the unveiling of the golden Buddha, and then there is I don't even know if I'm pronouncing this right. The Iroha? Iowa? No, Iroha. Um, I wanted to notice those two. Um, because there's a pattern, and the pattern is one that we've talked about in class, which is religion affects the arts, and then arts affects the people, or at least, well, this one is just the first two. So religion affecting the arts. Um, Buddhism, one of the key principles is that everything is impermanent. And we've talked a lot about how that is present without Japanese culture through Japanese concepts such as and Japanese aesthetics such as Wabi-Sabi, and Japanese concepts such as Ichigo Ichie. Um, and the Arawa, one, I do love it because it is a literary piece, which it's actually a perfect pentagram. So it uses all of the Japanese syllabary exactly once. Um, and even then, like it's the first lines are, even the blossoming flowers, colors are fragrant, but will they eventually scatter? I mean, but they will eventually scatter. I mean, that's what I meant. Um, and so, like, I definitely wanted to include it on here because it's it's reflective of the Buddhism principle of impermanence, and then it's using all of the Japanese syllabary exactly once. And so I just really thought that it was, symbolic of Japan. Um, yeah, yeah. And then the second time we see that is, or not the second time we see that, but the second one I wanted to note was the five mountains and 10 monastery system, which uh, m- which upon five mountains, um, Zen Buddhist institutions were placed, and once again, like Buddhism promotes or teaches uh, its principle that everything is impermanent. And I also don't know how to I also don't know how to pronounce this. Um, the tale of Hey. I'm gonna say the tale of H. Let me just do that. I should have Heiki. I'm gonna say that Heiki, the tale of Heiki. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Bledsoe-sensei. But the tale of Heiki. Um, and my first introduction to the tale of Heiki was actually Jujutsu Kaisen. um, Toto, one of the characters, makes a reference to an insert of the Tale of Heiki, or he uses an insert of Tale of Heiki, and it's one of impermanence. Um, and essentially what he was saying is that we are the exception. He was saying Jujutsu sorcerers are the one thing that doesn't that doesn't succumb to impermanence. Um, and yeah, so that was my first introduction to that. But I just wanted to include that in the red brackets because it is another repetition of the pattern religion affecting the arts. So Zen, the five mountains and 10 monastery system, Zen Buddhism affecting the tale of Heiki by once again reaffirming uh, the Buddhist principle of impermanence. Um, and all the five mountains and well, what the five mountains and 10 monastery systems did is it broadened and introduced Zen Buddhism to more parts of Japan, more parts of Japan. And Surezure Gusa, I wanted to include that as well, because uh, it was likened to the Pillow Book, and both of those they belong to or they're symbolic. They're symbolic of, or no, not symbolic. They're representative of a style of writing, which is like unstructured, spontaneous, um, nonsensical thoughts. So like the monk Kenko that writes Surezure Gusa, the prefatory message that he starts with that he starts his work with is like he's talking about how um, he's trying to make sense of like how much time he has spent sitting in front of his stone and his scroll, just writing whatever comes to his mind. And I wanted to include that because like I personally like writing that way, or I definitely should start doing it more. I just don't do it that often. And then the beginning of rental bookstores in 1630 broadens the experience of literary art in Japan. Um, Definitely think that the broadening the experience of literary art in Japan, which we see that literary art has been affected greatly by Buddhism. Um, this one essentially just completes the pattern of religion affects people. I mean, religion affects arts, and then the arts affect the people, which we see reflected in the aesthetic sense of Japanese people, Wabi-Sabi. Um, yeah, that would be the reflection of arts affecting the people. And I'm essentially attributing it to uh, the rental bookstores, which have broadened the experience of literary art in Japan. And then the Meiji period, uh, in which Japan is aiming to become a part of international society. So this one is also following, or is reflective of another Japanese concept or Japanese. I don't want to say pattern, but um, the one that I'm likening it to is the Do spirit or the Do methodology, or uh, which is that it's formalizing the pattern, repeating the pattern, mastering the pattern, and then going beyond it. And I believe that the Meiji period was one where Japan was starting to go beyond the pattern. And the pattern that was being formalized was the Japanese character. Um, yeah, the Japanese character. That's what they were going beyond. Um, Unfortunately, they didn't get to, how do I say this? Uh, Japan had introduced itself to the world. Um, However, the first instance that we see this happening, um, and prominently was when the U.S. came to Japan's borders and said, "Open up." Russia as well. The wet and I believe there was Russia. Oh, the UK. Um, yeah, Russia, UK, and the US came to Japan's borders and said, okay, we you have to open up, essentially. Um, and I think at that point, that was the start of going beyond the pattern of the Japanese character. Like more than formalizing it, more than repeating it, more than mastering it and understanding itself, um, it began becoming a player in the game. It became a character for others to enjoy and see um, during the Meiji period, of which Japan was introducing itself to the world. And I mainly included, I mainly included like this pattern actually of religion affecting the arts and the arts affecting the people. That wasn't actually my intention to bring. Um, it wasn't my intention to bring that to light like in this presentation. I actually just chose those in particular because they were works that I liked. Like they were works of literature. I mean, sorry, they were literature works of Japan that I liked. And yeah, yeah. All right. Ichigo Ichie. One chance, one opportunity, one encounter. I actually like the word encounter um, a lot more. Um, and when I say that, like my interpretation of Ichigo Ichie is influenced greatly by my Ikigai that I mentioned earlier. I was talking about competition, and on the uh, what is it? On the Lord, what was I about to say? Oh, on the Ikigai slide, I included a picture of Gojo versus Sukuna. Um, that was a moment of competition. It was a spectacle of a match, and like I want to encourage others to apply Ichigo Ie, especially to those moments of competition. So like grand finals of a particular tournament, grand finals of let's say Tekken, grand finals of Tekken. Like everybody in that stadium is watching that one moment, and everybody is appreciating and taking in the intellect, the spirit, the expression of character, the expression of player. Um, everybody's just taking it in, and it's beautiful, and that's the most like um, direct like experience I have with Ichigo Ichie, and I'm not saying that you have to be hyper focused in order to enjoy those moments, but it's just paying attention, just focusing your attention on that, not focusing on the actual subject, but like focusing your attention onto it and relating to it and making connections and just enjoying it. Um, yeah, it's a spectacle. Like it's 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 beautiful. Yeah, it's the application of Ichigo Ichie which allows you to find the beauty in the moment. All right, I think my slide has that covered. And that brings me to this slide. Um, I didn't really start paying attention to JJK until I read the manga, which forced me to slow down and take like in the information. There were even moments where like I like reread chapters just to make sure that I understood. Like anime episodes, I honestly don't. I don't rewatch them. Um, and that paying of attention is, I think, the biggest lesson that I've been taught in your class, Bledsoe-sensei. And it's the one I've practiced the most. And I've always been one to like to want to be thorough and to want to take things slow. Um, It's just I remember when I was little, like my mom and my siblings were like, "Luki, you're taking too long, or Luki, like hurry up." And I hated that because I wanted to take my time. Like I wanted to enjoy every moment. And being in your class, Bledsoe-sensei, um, has definitely allowed me to refine myself. And it's because I started taking things slower. I will say that like taking things slow in combination with starting things late is not a good mix, especially academically. Um, but yeah, and paying attention in your class just came naturally. And it was because you delivered information in a very relatable and humorous way, and that sparked my interest in the topics being expressed even more, and I paid more attention. Um, yeah. And I found myself not having to review much in your class simply because I paid attention. And then the work itself was reflective on the things that were aroused in our mind after going through the lecture and going through the assignments. Like it was a constant stream of relation through that reflection, um, which I believe like just allowed it to solidify in my mind at least even more so. Um, And that's exactly what happened with Jujutsu Kaisen. Like I started noticing a lot more. Um, I started realizing that, Jujutsu Kaisen really has a lot of Japanese elements in it. And I mean, I guess it makes sense now. I mean, it makes sense because it's manga. It originates from Japan. It's a Japanese creator. It's just I wasn't really like appreciating them because I wasn't very knowledgeable of it. And then once I started taking your class, I just started appreciating Jujutsu Kaisen even more. Um, and I guess that brings me to the next slide, Bledsoe Sensei. Um, thank you. Thank you, Bledsoe Sensei.